The Dream Lantern has found a story for you tonight. Settle in now. Let the day, with all its noise and all its weight, become something behind you. Something that has already finished. Something that doesn't need your attention anymore tonight. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench very gently. Let your hands rest exactly where they are. There is nothing you need to do right now. Nothing you need to solve. Nothing waiting that cannot simply wait. Tonight, we travel to a small, quiet town at the edge of a wide, gentle valley where the nights are long and very still, where the stars are very bright, where an old man lives alone in a house at the end of a lane that most people have never thought to walk down, and where every single night, without fail, he does the most remarkable thing. Close your eyes and let the story carry you there. His name was Aldric. He was old, not dramatically old, not the kind of old that announces itself, but the kind of old that accumulates slowly over a very long life, lived very quietly in the same small house, on the same still lane, in the same gentle valley, beneath the same wide, patient sky. His hair was white, his hands were thin and careful, his eyes were the particular shade of grey that very still water sometimes turns just before dawn. Not dark, not light, but something perfectly in between. He had lived in the house at the end of the lane for longer than most people in the town could remember. Some of the oldest residents recalled him from their childhood, already old even then, already quiet, already living in the same way he lived now, unhurried, attentive, entirely and completely himself. His house was small, two rooms downstairs, two rooms above, a garden at the back that was full and slightly wild and entirely its own. The front door was painted blue, a particular soft faded blue, the color of the sky at the very last moment before the full dark arrives. Not quite day, not quite night, something quietly in between. Visitors who came to the house for the first time almost always noticed the same things. The shelves, every wall of every room was lined with shelves, and every shelf was filled with small glass bottles. Hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, each one sealed with a small cork stopper, each one glowing very faintly with a light that was entirely its own, not bright, not demanding, simply present. Some glowed a deep, warm gold, some a soft pale blue, some a rose so faint it was almost white, some a green, the color of light through new leaves in early spring, and each one was labeled in a handwriting so small and careful that you had to lean very close to read it. A dream of a house by the sea, that no one has ever actually lived in. A dream of a conversation with someone who is no longer here. A dream of flying slowly over a valley in soft golden rain. A dream of a door that opened onto a garden that went on forever. Aldric collected forgotten dreams. It had begun a very long time ago, so long ago that Aldric himself could no longer say with certainty exactly when. He had been young, or younger at least, living in the same house, on the same lane, but with less white on his hair and less patience, perhaps in his hands. One night, he had woken in the small hours, the particular deep quiet of 3 in the morning, when the town outside was entirely still, when even the wind had stopped for a while, when the world felt very close and very silent and very large all at once. He had lain in the dark, aware that he had just been somewhere, somewhere very real, somewhere that had felt more complete and more present and more genuinely itself than most places he had been while awake. A dream. He could feel the edge of it, the warmth of whatever light had been in it, the particular quality of the air, the sense of having been somewhere that mattered. But the details were already going the way dreams go, not all at once, but dissolving slowly from the edges inward, like frost on a window when the morning begins to warm. He reached for them, mentally, to hold what was already living, but they went the way they always went, and he lay in the dark with nothing but the feeling, the warm, unnameable, entirely real feeling of having been somewhere beautiful and not being able to say where. That morning, he had sat at the small table by the window with his tea and thought about that feeling and wondered, where did dreams go when they were forgotten? Not the sleeping person's dreams, not the ones that faded upon waking and were simply gone, but the feeling of them, the warmth, the particular quality of light that existed only inside that tree, the specific, unrepeatable, entirely real atmosphere of a world that had existed completely for the duration of the dreaming, and then had simply ended. Did it disappear, or did it go somewhere? He sat with that question for a long time, longer, perhaps, than most people would sit with any question. But Aldrich had always been a person who sat with things for a long time before deciding what he thought about them. And what he decided that morning, sitting by the window with his cooling tea, watching the light move across the pale stones of the lane outside, was this. He did not think that beautiful things disappeared. Not really, not completely. He thought that they went somewhere, and that perhaps if a person paid the right kind of attention, they might be able to find where that somewhere was. He began to pay attention differently, not to his own dreams exactly, though he paid attention to those too, but to the space around dreams, the particular quality of the air in a room where someone had just woken from something deep, the way a morning felt sometimes heavy with something that was not quite emotion, something more like weather, a kind of pressure in the air, as if the room was full of something invisible, something that had been there during the night and had not quite left. He began to take notes in the small, careful handwriting that would later fill the labels on all those bottles. Observations, the way the light felt in his bedroom on mornings when he had dreamed something particularly vivid, the particular quality of stillness that those mornings had, the way certain rooms in certain houses felt at certain times of the morning, as if the room was still holding something, as if the air had not yet finished with whatever the light had put into it. He talked to people quietly without making much of it, asked gently over cups of tea and unhurried morning conversations whether they had dreamed, what it had felt like, not the content of the dream, but the feeling of it, the particular atmosphere, the quality of the light inside it. And the people told him, because Aldric was the kind of person that people told things to, not because he asked with any pressure, but because he listened with a kind of full, unhurried, completely present attention that made whatever you were saying feel worth saying. And slowly over months, and then years, a picture began to form of where forgotten dreams went. They didn't disappear. They settled very gently into the air of the room where the dreaming had happened, into the particular quality of the light of that morning, into the space between the waking and the day. And if you knew how to find that space, and if you had the right kind of vessel to keep what you found in it, you could collect them. The bottles had come later. He had tried many things first. Small boxes lined with soft cloth, folded pieces of paper written on both sides with careful observations. A journal which grew very thick, very quickly, and still felt like it was missing something. It was his neighbor's daughter, a child of perhaps 7 years old, who had suggested the bottles. She had come to visit one afternoon, the way she often did. She was the kind of child who found Aldric's house more interesting than most other places, who liked to sit on the low stool by the window and ask questions without any particular need for the answers to be simple. He had been explaining to her one afternoon what he was trying to do. In the way he explained things to children, which was exactly the same way he explained things to adults, without simplifying, without performing, simply describing what was true. She had listened with a particular serious attention of a child who is genuinely interested, and then she had said simply, "You need something that lets the light through." He had looked at her. "So you can see what's inside," she said. "And so what's inside can still see out." He had thought about that for a long time after she'd left. And then he had gone to the town and found a glass blower and asked for small bottles, as small and as clear as possible, with room for a cork. The first 100 had taken the better part of a year to fill. By the time he had been collecting for a decade, the shelves had begun to fill. By the time 2 decades had passed, there was barely a wall in the house that was not lined with glowing glass. He had never counted exactly how many there were. He thought it was something in the thousands, but the number didn't particularly matter to him. What mattered was the collecting, the careful, patient daily work of finding what had been left behind and giving it somewhere safe to rest. People came to see the bottles sometimes. Word has spread in the way that word spreads in small, quiet tones, not through announcement, not through any formal introduction, but through the slow and hurried movement of information between people who trust each other. A mention here, a wondering there, someone who had heard from someone who had heard from someone else. They came quietly, usually alone, usually in the morning, when the lane was still cool and still, and the blue door of Aldric's house was just visible at the end of it. He always let them in. He made tea. He moved slowly through the small rooms of his house, and he let them look. Most people stood for a very long time in front of the shelves, quietly reading the labels in the small, careful handwriting. A dream of a garden that belonged to no one and everyone. A dream of a voice singing from somewhere very close and very far at the same time. A dream of a road that went on forever through the most beautiful countryside anyone had ever seen. A dream of arriving somewhere and knowing immediately that you had always been expected. Most people became very quiet reading this. Some of them found a label that made them stop and look for a longer time. A dream of a house where someone you loved was still alive. A dream of a morning before anything had yet gone wrong. A dream of being completely and entirely all right. Aldric would always notice when someone stopped at a particular bottle. He would say nothing. He would simply make more tea and let the person stand in front of the bottle for as long as they needed to, because he understood that what they were feeling in that moment was not grief, not exactly. It was recognition, the particular feeling of finding something you did not know you had been looking for, something that you recognized without knowing exactly why. As if the dream on the label was not someone else's dream, but something that belonged to everyone who had ever dreamed at all. Something that was simply part of what it meant to be a person who slept and sometimes dreamed and sometimes woke with the feeling of having been somewhere beautiful and could not quite say where. There was a woman who came to visit the house one autumn. Her name was Sarah. She had traveled a long way from a city further north, where the streets were loud and the nights were rarely quiet, and sleep had become for her something effortful, something she approached with a kind of braced, tired resignation, rather than the easy, natural thing it had once been. She had heard about Aldric from a friend, who had heard from someone else, the usual quiet chain. She had not known quite what she expected. She had walked down the lane in the early morning when the light was still low and the air was cool and the town was barely beginning its day. She had knocked on the blue door and Aldrich had opened it and looked at her with those grey, still water eyes and said simply, "Come in." She had stood in the front room and looked at the bottles for a very long time. She read labels, one after another, moving slowly along the shelves, the way you move through a library when you are not looking for anything in particular, but are open to finding something. And then she stopped at a small bottle near the end of the last shelf, glowing with a light the color of warm honey. She leaned close and read the label, a dream of a morning when nothing was wrong, when the world was soft, and there was nowhere to be and nothing to carry. And the light came through the window like a promise. She stood there for a long time, and Aldrich made tea and said nothing, because he understood that what she had found on that shelf was not a stranger's dream, but something she had once known and had slowly stopped believing was still possible. She stayed for most of the morning, and when she left, she was quiet. Not the tight, effortful quiet she had arrived with, but something softer, something that had more room on it. That night, she slept in a small inn in the town and dreamed deeply for the first time in a very long time. Aldrich himself slept deeply every night, This surprised some people who assumed that a man who spent his life tending to dreams might have some complicated relationship with his own. But Aldric's relationship with sleep was the simplest thing about him. He lay down, he closed his eyes, and he trusted, not in anything dramatic, not in any formal way, simply in the dark, and in the quiet, and in the long, patient history of sleep, which had been carrying people safely through the night for as long as there had been people. He trusted that, and because he trusted it, sleep came to him easily, the way everything comes easily to someone who is not fighting it. He dreamed, of course, every night, and in the morning some of the dreams were gone, and he did not mourn them, because he knew they had not disappeared. They had simply settled into the air of the room, into the light of the morning, into the particular stillness of a house where someone has slept deeply and dreamed something great. And he would collect them later, carefully, patiently, and give them somewhere safe to rest, where they could go on glowing softly in their small glass bottles, on their quiet shelves, in the house at the end of the lane, where the door was painted the color of the sky just before the full dark, and the lights inside were always warm, and the tea was always ready, and nothing beautiful was ever truly lost. And tonight, in this quiet room, in this particular stillness, whatever you dreamed last night and could not remember upon waking, whatever beautiful thing dissolved from the edges inward, the way dreams always do, it did not disappear. It settled into the air of the room where you slept, into the light of that morning, into the warmth of wherever you were resting. It is still there. Every dream you have ever had, every beautiful world you have ever visited in the night, every version of somewhere wonderful that your sleeping mind has ever created. None of it gone, simply waiting in the soft, patient, invisible archive of everything that has ever been dreamed. And tonight, you are allowed to add to it something new, something that belongs only to you, something that no one else will dream in quite this way, on this night, in this particular stillness. Let your breathing slow, let your body grow heavy, let your thoughts drift the way they drift when you stop trying to hold them, when you simply let them go where they want to go, into the soft dark, into the warm quiet, into the place where Aldric's bottles glow on their shelves, soft and patient and full of everything beautiful that was ever dreamed. He is there with his tea and his careful handwriting and his still grey eyes, ready to collect whatever you leave behind tonight, so that nothing is lost, so that everything beautiful has somewhere safe to rest. Let go now, gently, the way a dream lets go of you in the morning, without effort, without resistance, simply releasing into the soft, warm dark that is waiting for you right now, just past this last breath, just beyond this last thought. The lantern will be waiting for you tomorrow night. Sleep well.